Good afternoon. My name is Mary Beth Modick, and on behalf of the Northeast Ohio Year of the Nurse Steering Committee, I would like to welcome you to our last program of the year, celebrating nursing history and the dignity of nurses' work. Before we get into the throes of our program, I would like to acknowledge several individuals whose enthusiasm, time, and talent brought these programs to fruition. I would like to thank Dr. Carol Musel, Dean of Francis Payne Bolton School of Nursing, who served as Grand Chair of the Steering Committee, for her masterful stewardship of our ideas. I would like to also thank our tri-chairs, Dr. Joan Cavanaugh, ACNO for Nursing Education and Professional Development for the Cleveland Clinic Health System, Dr. Rebecca Patton, Assistant Professor of Nursing at Francis Payne Bolton School of Nursing and former President of ANA, and Dr. Patricia Sharpnick, Dean and Strawbridge Professor at the Breen School of Nursing, Ursuline College, for their nimble navigation of the myriad of impediments we encountered as COVID-19 gripped our nation and the world, and we tried to propel our ideas for connecting forward. I would like also to give special recognition to the industrious Dr. Cindy Willis, Senior Director of Nursing Education for Cleveland Clinic Health System, and the incomparable Dr. Vita Locke, Dean and Professor Emerita, Cleveland State University, for the Year of the Nurse Stories. Cindy created the template and calendar for recruiting nurses. Vita, with her poetic and lyrical expertise, edited each story. She was assisted by the amazing Liz Lundblad, Internal Communications Manager at FPB, who for the past 340 days have not missed a single day of posting stories. Dr. Bette Idemoto, one of our panelists, is featured today. I would like to express gratitude to Nurse Janet Kinney, who with Maureen Kendall from Francis Payne Bolton worked tirelessly behind the scenes to bring this program to life. Finally, I would like to extend my sincere appreciation to my Northeast Ohio CNS colleagues, most notably Dr. Jennifer Caldwell, President of NEOCNS. NEOCNS is co-sponsoring this event. Jennifer created the PowerPoint highlighting contributions of NEOCNS members that appeared while you were waiting for the program to begin. There are two components of the program today. The first will be thoughts, observations, and lived experiences of our auspicious panel of nurse leaders. They will introduce themselves and each answer the question, what does the concept of dignity of nurses' work mean to you? If the introductions were left to me, I would spend the entire 90 minutes describing the unique handprint they have each left on me. After the first question has been answered, I will direct the remaining questions to specific individuals. With full transparency, they have received the questions in advance. The remainder of the program will allow for audience participation with this segment, Nursing Trivia, What Do You Know? So let's get started. So Meri Armour, would you like to introduce yourself and answer the question about dignity of work?
Sure. So I go first because it's alphabetical and not because I have any auspicious knowledge about any of this, but I'd like to tell you that I've been a proud nurse for over 45 years. I am a graduate of Case Western Reserve, the Francis Payne Bolton School of Nursing and the Weatherhead School of Management. And my career has spanned from staff nurse all the way to CEO of a hospital. And I retired in May of 2019 after 13 years serving as the CEO of Le Bonheur Children's Hospital in Memphis, Tennessee. In August of 2019, I started law school at Emory School of Law because I want to pursue further in my retirement my abilities and skill and knowledge to be a better child advocate for children for the next 25 years or so. So next I'll talk about my version of the dignity of work, in particular nurses' work. So as I started looking into this idea, which was a question that had been posed to all of us, I came up with that it really is a social sciences construct, which really relates to a mix of agency and craft and skill, all of it captured by a person who tries to make something or make something better. And it sort of wells up from within, much like pride does in people. And it's measured in doing something significant and worthy in the world, a commitment to a greater good or a better community, if you will. Nurses' work is knowledge-based, science-based, and autonomous. And that dignity of that work, that agency and skill, is really the imperative that nurses have in caring for their patients, the families, the communities they serve and live in, their colleagues, and the profession as a whole, I think. I think that this sense of dignity in nurses' work is what makes them such great interdisciplinary team members. They really do understand what it means to have dignity in the work you're doing. And so it's been reported that they actually hold other professions, like professions, medical professions and like, in high esteem and admired because they themselves appreciate the dignity of the work that they're doing.
Well, Meri, thanks. Thanks so much. Now we'll hear from Ellen.
Hello, everyone. I wish I could see all the participants in this conference today. Although we're a panel, I am a colleague of yours. And on the Year of the Nurse, I just want to say congratulations to you for what you do every day. I'm just proud to be a member of the same profession. And I salute all of you that are on this call. I am a BSN grad of Georgetown University, and I have an MSN from UC San Francisco Medical Center. I entered that place in 1967 in the summer of love, and it was quite an experience. Later on, I got an MPH from UCLA, and I am honored to say that I have an honorary degree, undergraduate degree from Francis Payne Bolton. In terms of my own career, it's been, I would say, eclectic, and I would also say just joyful. I've had the most amazing group of experiences over a lifetime. Some of the highlights, and these are in no particular order, but just the span of things that one can do in nursing or one finds oneself in healthcare and nursing. I was one of the few young people, young Caucasians that worked for Carl Stokes when he became mayor. And I was part of the entire array of things that happened as he became the first African-American mayor of Cleveland, and worked to better public health. And that's where I was working when I worked for him. I've been a trustee of a hospital for over 40 years. And that again has been a huge honor. And I believe I am the first nurse in Greater Cleveland that served as a trustee. And on many occasions, for way too long, I was the only nurse and the only woman in many, many boardrooms over those years. I was privileged to be involved with Robert Wood Johnson for over a decade, and between working for as a site visitor for Robert Wood Johnson for funded nursing projects, and my own consulting practice, which I've had for about 25 years, I have visited hospitals and schools of nursing in every state in the United States, except for Alabama and Georgia, and they're on my list, and I'm hoping to finish that off before I'm fully retired. I helped create an organization that I am very proud of, and it is the National Forum for State Nursing Workforce Centers. A lot of people don't know what this is, but it was one of the first organizations that worked on data and having uniform data sets on the supply and the demand and the need for nursing. And I've also been involved, as many of the panelists and many of you in the audience, with philanthropy and raising money for nurses and nursing causes. In terms of dignity, when I was posed this question, immediately went back to the fact that I went to a Catholic nursing school and a Jesuit nursing school, and also a all-women's Catholic high school. And I believe that the concept of the dignity of people's work, whatever that work was embedded in the two schools that I attended, particularly with the Jesuits. The Jesuits have a saying in Latin, cura personalis, and what that means, it's a dedication to promoting human dignity and care for the mind, body, and spirit of the person. And that's part of the core beliefs of a Jesuit, the Jesuit order of priests, and it infiltrates the academic work and the culture of if you attend a Jesuit university. At the time that I went, and my classmate and the person a year ahead of me, Joyce Fitzpatrick, that you'll hear from, also went to Georgetown. It was an all men's school. The only women were nurses. And even though we were a small school, they embedded into us the concept that our work was enormously full of dignity, and also, which I hadn't really thought about until I was presented with this question, was that the dignity comes together with a nurse and a patient. Nurses see the dignity of every patient they serve, and in caring for that patient and the dignity of that person, it dignifies the work that they do. And that is how I see it's a interpersonal exhibition of dignity that is absolutely beautiful, and I believe it's core to our profession.
Thanks, Ellen. Dr. Fitzpatrick?
Thank you very much. I'm Joyce Fitzpatrick, the director of the Meri and Kay Shaughnessy Nurse Leadership Academy at the Francis Payne Bolton School of Nursing. I'm also a distinguished university professor as of this year. And I've been at FPB for quite some time, so I know all of you and look forward to working with you through the Shaughnessy Leadership Academy. Our goal is very simply to make FPB the leadership destination nationally and globally for nursing. So thanks to Ellen for going ahead of me and explaining the Jesuit mission that we were instilled with in our undergraduate education at Georgetown. And let me add to some of the comments about the dignity of the work that we do as nurses. And as I thought about this question, it occurred to me that the dignity of our work is embedded in every aspect of our relationship with patients. We experience humanity at the most vulnerable times for individuals, whether they're sick or they're well, when they're going through a transition of development, such as an adolescent who needs some counseling, or when a person is critically ill. We have a relationship with patients that is so profound, is so meaningful, because of the vulnerable times in their lives that we come to them. And nurses are honored for that, the dignity that they provide to individuals in health and wellness. And we are trusted by the public because of our commitment to not only individuals and families and their communities, but also to global health. I mean, we have a firm belief in our profession about health for all as a right and the dignity of persons everywhere. And our commitment to social justice for all people through the provision of healthcare is another aspect that provides dignity to our nursing work. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like next for Dr. Ron Hickman to address the group.
Thank you, Dr. Modig. First, I want to begin by saying what an impressive year we've had, an unprecedented year of challenges that highlighted the tremendous work that nurses do both nationally and internationally. My name is Dr. Ron Hickman. I'm the Ruth M. Anderson Endowed Professor at Case Western Reserve University, and I also serve as the Associate Dean for Research. My journey as a nurse wasn't your quite typical journey. I started out being pre-med, and through my journey of undergraduate experiences and then being able to shadow nurses, I became acutely aware of the contributions of nurses' work. Matter of fact, the dignity of nurses' work. That led me to seek education at the Francis Payne Bolton School of Nursing, and it inspired me to keep asking questions that helps to inspire and motivate me to do some cutting edge research and now lead the research mission. But Mary Beth asked us to think about what does nurses' dignity, nurses' work and dignity relate to me personally. And I am a scholar of Martin Luther King Jr., and Martin Luther King Jr. has a quote I think captures my sentiment about how nurses' work and dignity align. And I quote, "No work is insignificant. All labor that uplifts humanity is dignity." For me, nurses' work is always and has been significant. Whether it's the brushing the hair of a critically ill patient, holding the hand of a dying patient, or video conferencing today with a patient's family, it's all significant and it's all dignified. To me, the COVID-19 pandemic has highlighted the dignity of nurses' work and how we substantially uplift humanity. What nurses' work and aligns with dignity means to me is to also to lean into our challenges, to alleviate the suffering and positively impact individuals and communities, both here in the US and abroad. My colleagues have already given so many examples, rich examples of how this concept relates to the current context of delivering nursing care, and I couldn't echo it any further more than this. Thank you for this opportunity to share this perspective, and I'll toss it back over to Mary Beth.
Thank you, Ron. Thank you. Next, we'll have Dr. Bette Idemoto.
Okay, my name is Bette Kiyoko Idemoto. In addition to being a wife, mother, and grandmother, I'm also very proud to have been a nurse for almost 50 years. December 7th, that's today's date, in 1941 will always be recalled as the day that America was attacked by Pearl Harbor. President Roosevelt called the unprovoked attack a day which will live in infamy. Telling my story, particularly today, has special significance for me. Although I don't think about it often, this event is important in my personal history as well as my ancestors. Even though they were born in California, my parents were not viewed as Americans in World War II and were put in concentration camps. Because of these hardships, coupled with the Japanese tradition of a matriarchal society, my mother was my greatest influence. She encouraged me my entire life to do my best in school, in Girl Scouts, and in everything I did. I learned essential life lessons early. When I was in the 8th grade, my teacher asked me to talk to the class about the internment camps. At that time, I had no idea what that meant. I had heard about camps and was assuming that it was like Y camp, not really what they were. He sent me home to ask my parents, and I was surprised at their answers and that they weren't bitter. They taught me the value of dignity for all people, even though the camp had robbed them of my heritage. I have no family heirlooms, just like some of our immigrants at the borders today. Then in high school, my mother was adamant that I should go away to college to learn who I was. So I went to Ohio State to learn more about being independent and on my own. I became so independent that I got married because my husband was being sent to Vietnam. We had our first child before I finished nursing school, and again, my mother insisted that I finish. So with her help, I graduated. I then worked per diem every other weekend at Fairview General Hospital. It's in Cleveland, and I participated in the new ICU step down on 2 North. The ICUs had just been created. Our first ICU had 4 beds with ventilators and even CVP lines, which encouraged my love of intensive care nursing. My passion for critically ill patients led to advanced practice training, when I supported the work of Dr. Barbara Daly in developing the first acute care nurse practitioner master's program as its clinical coordinator. My mother lived life and believed in the dignity of people, and this influenced my decision to become a nurse. The dignity of patients is so vital. Today, our nurses demonstrate the human value of dignity of the people who can't breathe and place a great deal of trust in the nurse. Especially now during the pandemic, nursing is a profession people trust to care for their loved ones who are totally dependent on us. That takes a great deal of trust. I'm grateful to have had the opportunity to serve in leadership positions such as the ANA Board of Ethics, where nurses affirm the dignity of every human being. All my life experiences, including the influence of my mother, helped me see how nurses everywhere can work to ensure the dignity of all people. My nursing career has spanned almost a half a century, during which I was a bedside nurse, clinical nurse specialist, and a researcher. I've had the privilege of mentoring new grads as well as returning old nurses to support their work in providing the best care to ensure the best outcomes possible. As I look back on what I have gained, this wisdom to use my knowledge, skills, empathy, experiences, and my whole self to share the best aspects of our nursing profession. I give credit to many nursing colleagues, particularly to Dr. Denise Kresovic, who's been my unfailing support. Thank you for this opportunity to share.
So Betty, just an amazing story, and thank you so much for sharing that and submitting it to Bette so she could post today. Okay. So Meri Johnson, you're the bookend for this session.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for the invitation to be here. My name is Meri Johnson, and I thought I would add a bit of glam to this conversation because it is the celebration of each of you, nurses who are attending and us who are speaking, as well as to all the nurses in the whole country. And because it's been such a disastrous year, 2020 in some ways. Now you'll be happy to know I'm not reading through them, all right? So I'll take them off, but just know that a little levity we can all benefit from, I think. But my professional career really has taken so many paths, and which in many ways for me reflects the core strength of what the nursing profession is about. Because nursing is rooted in a consistent education and licensure process, it provides the gateway for unlimited opportunities that reflect the dignity of this profession. My own career path is primarily in ambulatory care. While I began as a staff nurse, as most of us have said, I became a nurse leader as the director of ambulatory care at a clinic for many years ago. But that opportunity really in turn created unlimited opportunities to represent nursing and the dignity of the nursing profession in all kinds of healthcare arenas, all kinds of arenas. I served as the president of a national nursing organization for ambulatory care. I served on the ANCC expert nurse leadership for panel, on the Joint Commission as a patient navigator, helping patients understand how this healthcare system works, which we would all admit is quite confusing. And as an educator, and probably my most satisfying role in nursing, in my nursing career, which has been quite long, is that as a career coach for nurses. I'm really what is known as the working retired, and as many of us probably have alluded to here, and I continue to be active in the roles that I love. I teach a specialized course preparing nurses for ANCC certification. And I'm a current career coach for nursing, as I said. But both of these paths evolve because I understand the practice of ambulatory care and the issues that nurses face in their career choices, which are many. I am forever saying to anyone who will hear me or listen, no one can live without nurses. The healthcare team needs nurses to implement the plan of care, and patients need nurses to implement the plan of care. It doesn't matter what the setting is or the practice or the circumstances. Nothing reflects the dignity of nursing more than being trusted by the individuals to care for them at their most vulnerable moments in which their lives have changed dramatically. And Lord knows today's world is such a clear reflection of that. My own professional life would amplify the changing course I've had in several times in my life. This is possible actually for all nurses because of the education that you have received and the experiences you have built. Your career choices are unlimited and you need only to have the courage to try. Nursing is the hardest job you will ever love. Thank you.
Thank you, Meri. Wow. You know, could I possibly be writing and listening at the same time? And I just have to, fortunately, this is being taped so we can really revel in all of the thoughts that you have offered. So thank you so much. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pose specific questions to 2 or 3 of the panelists, and they are going to respond. So the first question I have is for Ellen and for Bette. And I'd like you to name a nurse luminary from the past who influenced your thinking. And what was it about this nurse that drew you to her or him? So Ellen, we'll start with you.
In a career, in a lifetime in nursing, as long as I have been in it, I've met some just extraordinary and remarkable people. But this question made me realize that there were 2 people that influenced my ability to be a leader, to just say yes, because I saw these 2, they were both educators. I was at a very magical time at UCSF. I had the privilege of having Shirley Chater and Reba DeTournier as professors. I'm assuming that most of the audience is very young and would not necessarily know who these 2 people are, but you have to picture me coming from Rocky River, Ohio to San Francisco in 1967. And the 2 courses that I was most interested in, one of which I was most afraid of, were research and education, which was my minor. So in walks Shirley Chater. Shirley Chater was a civic activist. She was elegant. She was incredibly well-spoken. She, at that time, was involved in politics in the city of San Francisco, and later on through many opportunities, which she said yes to in places and did things that no nurse had done before, ended up as the Commissioner for Social Security for the United States of America. I mean, an enormous job. And throughout her career, she was a person that always saw that no matter what it was, that it was yes. The nurse had the skills, the talent, the passion, and the drive to tackle any project. And I was just bowled over as this young person from, like I say, Rocky River, Ohio, to see this superstar professor and then to follow her. The other person was Reba DeTournier. Reba had most of her career was as an educator and became a dean both at UCLA and later at University of Washington. And again, was just a remarkable person because she encouraged all of us to think differently about the problems that we were presented with in 1967 and 1968 in San Francisco. Among those problems was a profound shortage of nurses. And she is one of the people who created the community college nursing program and system in the United States, and is one of the very early pioneers that understood that there probably needed to be many pathways into the profession of nursing and the need for people to continue their education. So these two people continue to mentor me in my own career, even long distance, even up until they were retired, and in Reba's case, in a nursing home. And just the power of what Meri's doing and what Joyce and Ron and all the rest of you that are in education is a very powerful role. But those are the two people that I would offer as examples, again, of saying yes, taking what you have as a nurse and saying yes to whatever circumstances require leadership. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Ellen, and thank you for saying yes for being part of today. Betty, what about you?
Okay, I'll try, even though I can't figure out how to get my camera to work. I picked for my luminary Florence Nightingale, even though everybody knows all about her history and that we're celebrating her 200th birthday, et cetera, because I thought it was remarkable when I was in school, way back when I was 17, that she in many ways gave up all her rich life where she could have been a society person and did so many wonderful things with her 38 nurses during the Crimean War, and actually set the groundwork for nursing research and for sanitation and for cleanliness, and saved lives and reduced deaths by 40% just in the short time she was in that war. But her main thing that she did was she formalized education for professional nurses so that they could influence healthcare and healthcare policy and all the things that we're doing today. In the year of the nurse, patients are so sick with COVID, and the mortality rate continues to increase so much that we just have to look at what she would be telling us to do. Bedside nurses are inspiring examples as they all care for these people who are so sick and can't see their families during their last days. Particularly during the pandemic, the nurses are facing not only the virus themselves, but social isolation for themselves and their patients. Hand washing, good nutrition, and mental health are much more important than they ever were. And it's up to us nurses to make sure that we follow what Florence would have had us do. As a vaccine nears fruition and we can be part of that whole rollout, because we can be an integral part of planning it, both for our communities and for our workplaces, churches, schools, and governments are all looking to nurses to help make sure that these vaccines get to the people that need to be, getting it. And we can certainly look to our own nurses because we have such a rich history of education, and the role of the advanced practice nurse is certainly a major accomplishment in what we do. The second legacy is the use of technology, which continues into telehealth. And personally, I think one of the most important things is evidence-based practice and how we can move research into practice, such as proning, which is going to be helping all these people with the respiratory difficulties with the COVID-19, and the human contact to prevent social isolation. It's the essence of the art and science of nursing that we all dearly love and appreciate. Thank you.
Well, thank you for taking some time to remind us of Florence's remarkable contributions. Because again, we could love to spend 5 hours on trivia questions for her. We just later on. So thank you, Betty, so much. So the next question is for Drs. Fitzpatrick and Hickman about. So the question is, what scientific advancements or nursing contributions would you say was impactful on your career?
Joyce, would you like to go?
Sure. Thank you, Ron. Certainly the work of Hildegard Peplau was a strong influence in my career, as Peplau, the very first psychiatric nurse, delineated the scientific components of the nurse-patient relationship. So she described that nurse-patient relationship as the essence of what we do as professional nurses at the bedside and all other aspects of our care. And she was very careful to chart the science, both the theory and the research embedded in that relationship. So as a psychiatric nurse, that became the core of what I did. And I firmly believe it's the core of what we all do as nurses. I also believe that it's the core of what we do as nurse leaders, because leadership is also about developing relationships wherever you are with whatever constituents you have. So I have to acknowledge Peplau as the first scientist in psychiatric nursing and as a leader of our profession for her influence. And Ron.
Well, thank you, Dr. Fitzpatrick, for those remarks. I want to add, from my lens, there's so many things we could think about in terms of scientific contributions. For me and my sort of time as being a nurse scientist, I can't imagine not having the National Institute of Nursing Research. So I'm going to take us back to the fact of the passage in 1985 of the Health Extension Act, which became law in that year that authorized the National Center for Nursing Research. And then the center was elevated in 1993 to an institute. And the reason why I say that is because, prior to the existence of the National Center for Nursing Research, I think, there was very small numbers of nurse scientists. And with the creation of the National Center for Nursing Research, now the National Institute of Nursing Research, we've seen major investments in the development of nurse scientists like myself, who receive scholarships and training, both pre-doctoral and postdoctoral, allowing us to really have the funding needed to make the substantial clinical impacts and community impacts that our science could and continues to have right now in this COVID-19 pandemic. I just can't imagine what it would be like if that particular entity wasn't there for nurse scientist trainees, for nurse scientists now not having that fundamental science. And I believe that the work of nurse scientists funded by the NINR certainly helped to launch nursing science to a level to we're not only relegated to the National Institute of Nursing Research any longer for funding, but nurses are funded through a variety of mechanisms, and our body of research is well respected. And so personally, being a recipient of funding from that institute, from a doctoral student to now, I can't imagine the world without the National Center for Nursing Research, the National Institute of Nursing, the National Institute of Nursing Research. And I can only imagine where we're going to go as we think about 2030 and then living life after the pandemic, how hopefully more revered our science is for its impact on individuals and communities in the US and abroad. So thank you, Mary Beth.
Oh my gosh. Wow. I'm reveling on every word. Goodness. All right. Thank you. Our next question is for Meri Armour and Ellen. So the question is, what leadership behaviors did you embrace early in your career? And can you attribute the characteristics to a nurse who is well known to the profession? Meri?
Oh, I love this question, Mary Beth. So leadership is, it's not a rank, it's a way of being, it's a way of belonging to a group. And it's usually defined with a lot of qualitative adjectives like charismatic, visionary, achievement-oriented. And of course, leaders have to have followers, people who believe as you do and are willing to take the same path and follow you down the same road that you have envisioned. But I would argue that the most important thing about leadership is that it really is about courage. And so for me, leadership takes courage. It takes courage to think big and to believe it can happen. That you have a patient, for example, who hasn't gotten out of bed in 3 weeks, and you can help get them mobilized. You can help get them returned to home. Those are big ideas that do change people's lives. I think that it's the ability, the courage to uphold your own core values and to defend them from the detractors who would not see it the same way. And courage is to defend what is right, right versus wrong, and obviously the rights of others, including patients and families, colleagues, and peers. And I think courage also requires you to be vulnerable to others. So in the leadership role, people can really see you as an authentic self, as the real person that you are. So it seems to me that leadership is ensconced in every nurse that we see working today. They all have leadership, not about rank, it's about being. And so the courage to walk into a patient's room who has COVID-19 and care for them and know that there are risks, serious risks associated with that is brave. I mean, it's brave and courageous to be by their side when they're dying and no family can be there. Courageous work. And to show up day after day to serve in the very same way. It's very courageous. And COVID is just today's example of the crisis that nurses face. But we've seen the same thing for hundreds of years. We've seen wars, we've seen plagues, we've seen pestilence, we've seen poverty, we've seen disasters. And nurses have always risen to that occasion with leadership and courage, I think. My example of a nurse leader that really shaped me in a way that I think was just foundational to my personal life and to my career was the late Grace Sills. Grace was the former dean at Ohio State College of Medicine. She was a friend, but she was also an individual who always was supportive, always guiding, always cheerleading for people. And she rejected the idea, and Joyce will remember this, she rejected the idea that mentorship was a teacher-student relationship. She really saw it as mentorship as being on par with one another. It was an equality. And her famous quote she used to always say was, I learn as much from you as I hope to impart to you. So she taught me how to believe in myself and in my strengths. And she always, always coached me to share whatever I learned along the way with other people. She was a huge advocate for teaching and developing the next generation of young nurses. And I think for that, she will be forever remembered and loved by all of those who knew and worked with her.
Thank you, Meri. Ellen, question for you.
Yes, again, I reverted when I was preparing for this back to my education and the power that I gained from going to an all-women's high school, and again, Georgetown undergraduate BSN at a time where, particularly Georgetown, was an all-male school except for the women in nursing. I'm one of those funny people that people even remember probably from grade school that just liked to be in charge of things. And I just did. And I just liked meetings and I just like rallying people. And I guess I was just, that's just the way I was built and so on. But one can have energy and passion, but not necessarily directed in appropriate ways. And my work as in student government, I was always president of everything, all that those sorts of behaviors I relished, but it was an opportunity to practice those things. So by the time I got to Georgetown and then beyond, I had already mastered a number of what I regard as key components of leadership. And I genuinely was shocked and horrified when I would go and say yes and go to meetings and find out that people really didn't think I belonged there. And they really didn't want me there. And they really weren't interested in what I had to say. And I thought to myself, yes, as a nurse, I do belong here. I've already done these things in other settings, and I have every right to be at this table with you, and I am your colleague. And even though, and it goes back to the word that Meri used about courage, maybe it was ignorance on my part or something, but I found the courage to stay in my seat and put myself in seats in other places. The reason I tell that story is because, in my opinion, there are many, many places in which nurses need to be that they perhaps are not, or maybe there's only one and we need more. Joyce and I both been involved in, and perhaps others of you on the panel, with the Nurses on Boards Coalition out of Washington. And I am, so thrilled with what Joyce is doing at FPB and with the Leadership Institute, because I do believe that everything about us as nurses, at Georgetown, they told us, you are a leader. And this is the beginning, first year students at Georgetown University. And we accepted that, and we moved forward with that as part of our identity and persona as a nurse. In terms of an example, I saw many, many male and female leaders in nursing. And, but I have to say that one of the most striking was to follow Joyce Fitzpatrick around, which I did as her colleague and friend, and again, learned and watched in astonishment as she raised money for nursing and nursing education, the likes of which had never been seen in this country by any schools of nursing. And I say that as an observer of over a long period of time, and to watch her leadership. And she wasn't exactly sure what she was doing. I'm sure most of us think Joyce just always knows everything perfectly and whatever, but I know for a fact she was feeling her way, and she was, when I was there I was privileged to watch her grow in just that aspect of deanship, that and to see someone and how they did it. And so, although I feel like I have a lot of leadership talent, I tried my very best to watch other nurse leaders and other leaders in other professions and take the best of what they did and incorporate it with the, with the personality and the drive that I have. And I think that's one of the wonderful things about this becoming something in the Leadership Institute and the Nurses on Boards. And I have challenged as a trustee at the Cleveland Clinic all the nursing people there to get involved with Nurses on Boards and find a place. And I urge everyone in the audience to find a place to take on a leadership role, even if it's very, very small, because the world needs nurse leaders. Thank you.
Okay. So, gosh, we've gone from very, very Gestalt thinking to building organizations, being on boards. And now this question is, the next question is for Bette and Meri, and that's the question about nursing organizations. And so how wonderful it is to be members of nursing organizations. And if you would just take a few minutes to describe what, let's see, what nursing organization has been influential in your career, and can you just share a brief story of how it was created? So, Meri, do you want to start?
Okay, I'll start. Well, my professional organization that I give a tremendous amount of credit to for what I became and the opportunities that it provided was the American Academy of Ambulatory Care Nursing. And it's a fairly young organization. It's only 49 years old. But it's amazing to me, and I've had the pleasure of being on the board and the president, all those things. But really my gratitude, my absolute gratitude is to this organization of leaders who helped me grow up as a young nurse leader in ambulatory care. The key to networking in professional organizations is just that you're in it together and you help each other. And there is nothing truer than in the ambulatory world, because we would often say we were the stepchildren. Now we're the most important thing for our processes. So as I say to my colleagues in ambulatory care, because I continue to be involved in them, it really in an emeritus status at this point, because I've been long associated with it. But as I say, I feel like my grandmother who's watched the birthing of a baby all the way to actually about age 30 now. So we're just meaning the evolution of what we have become and how we have supported each other is truly such a gift. I always say AAACN is big enough to get things done and small enough to know the people to do it with. And it's that give and take, those relationships that have built it to be what it is. And I think will have, it's in its heyday at the moment. So I'm the proud grandmother of all this organization because of where it is and its mark that it's making in the care in our country and in our world. So thank you.
Thanks. Bette, what organization do you want to speak about?
Well, actually, I have two, but I don't think I can talk about the ANA because it's just had such a long history. So I picked the National Association of Clinical Nurse Specialists because it's the organization that ANA relinquished when they did away with the CNS Council in the 80s. They wanted to expand it so that it would be a council of advanced practice nurses. And so the nurse practitioners, nurse midwives, and an anesthetist wanted to have, part of this council. So they disbanded the CNS Council, and the CNS group decided that they really thought they would like to have their own national representation in an organization. So they'd been meeting in national, local, and regional conferences for a few years, mostly in California, Indiana, and Ohio. And we're concerned because we didn't have a national voice anymore, not really because we're part of the 4 advanced practice groups. So in 1992, a national CNS conference was held at Indiana University where a leadership group drafted a constitution, bylaws, and framework for the newly organized NACNS, which is what it is today. And 69 charter members joined at that time. That's the historical background. So we talk about a young organization, and this one is very young. And with the support of the AACN Critical Care Innovations Arm, which provided some management oversight, and the NACNS became a legal entity. So on September 30th, 1995, it held its first national meeting at Indiana University, and I'm not sure, but I think maybe a few of our members actually went to that. They had a statement development committee develop the original NACNS statement on CNS practice and education. It was published in 1998 and has continued to articulate all the competencies and outcomes for contemporary practice and essential outcomes for education that the CNS provide as standards. The membership grew from 67 to 530 in the first 18 months of its existence, and it is now more than 2,000 clinical nurse specialists in the national organization, and there are local chapters all around the country. In fact, our local chapter is one of the sponsoring organizations for this conference. It also won in 2017 the the national award from the NACNS for its work. The CNS role of ensuring evidence-based care to improve outcomes and reduce healthcare costs continues today from its very beginnings. And I guess that's what I wanted to say.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. So I want to also be mindful of time. So I have 1 or 2 more questions. I have a few more, but I think I'm just going to just throw out two. And so, Meri and Joyce, I would like to ask the two of you why you think it's important for nurses to know about nursing history. So Meri.
Okay, got it. I know, Armour first, got it. So nursing history, I think, is important for current and future generations of nurses because it's so important to know where you came from. I mean, who went before you? What did they do? And I think it serves to validate the work that nurses do. I think it inspires nurses to see the greatness that existed before. And I think it also provides confidence and example of how nurses have made an impact for the betterment of peoples in the world. So I think that it's a very important piece for the next generations of nurses to continue to learn about our own heroes and their own people that have developed and advanced the profession of nursing in order for them to continue to be their best selves. I think that realizing the dignity and the courage of those who preceded us really empowers you to achieve or even transcend the goals that most nurses say the reason they went into nursing is to help people. So when you see these years of history of nurses helping and changing and improving the lives of the people they touched, it's a very empowering thing to know that that's possible. You can still do that, you know, and I think that's the value of nursing history. It's always about using history to look forward. You know, there's facing history in ourselves is an important concept, obviously. So helping people is part of the foundation, and finding that tenure, that track record of history of helping and changing the world for the better is important, in particularly so many young people who really want to do that in today's world. They want to change it. They want to make it better. They want to be great nurses. They want to help people. And that's what I think history can help them do.
Joyce?
I would totally agree with you, Meri, that in order to move forward, we sometimes have to look back. And looking back on the marvelous, the risk-taking nurses in our past will help us every time we have that feeling that, you know, maybe we don't know what to do and how to move forward. If we can just take the strength of those people and the courage of those people who came before us, we can move forward. And so history is how we learn.
So the final question is about the future. And so this question is posed to Ron and Joyce. And so just put your glasses on and think about the year 2030, and where do you see and where do you envision nursing being in 10 years from now? So Ron, do you want to start with that?
Certainly, I'll go first. And so, Mary Beth, I've thought about this question quite a lot, and thinking about what's been going on in social events and the current sort of context of what we've been all dealing with in terms of COVID-19. You know, we've heard about courageous leadership. I expect and I envision that nurses will become and more recognized for their leadership. I see that nurses will serve as change agents in addressing social determinants of health and ensuring equitable and accessible care for all. I think nurses in 2030 will be preparing other nurse leaders to tackle system level issues, you know, system barriers that may obstruct those access to care or the delivery of the highest quality care possible. I see us developing research to promote collaborative care models to further our own well-being, clinician well-being and resiliency, to disaster preparedness, and going back to history, a little bit about going back to the sort of the fundamentals of community and public health nursing. I also see nurses envisioned as technologists. We're clinicians, but we work with technology in multiple domains and across care settings. But I also see us as developing a body of knowledge that allows us to develop the technology to better serve those recipients of our care, and develop new products and processes that will continue to drive healthcare well beyond 2030. So, Mary Beth, I mean, those are big ideas, and those are just a few.
Well, we need big ideas. That's how we continue to be catalysts of change. Thank you, Ron. Joyce, last question is for you.
Well, I have lots of dreams about 2030, but let me share with you 3 that I think are extremely important. One has to do with policy. We definitely will have more nurses at the policy tables. We've set the stage for that now with the nurses on boards. We're moving in that direction. And secondly, I would totally agree with Ron about the development of our science. I'm hopeful that we will have a nurse who wins a Nobel Prize for science. And this year we did have nominees for the Nobel Peace Prize who were 2 nurses who had demonstrated the value of nursing. So perhaps we will also have nurses win the Nobel Peace Prize in addition to the Nobel Prize for Science. And then thirdly, and again, Ron has already alluded to this, the globalization of our work will expand, whether it's collaborative research with colleagues around the world, transportable educational programs, credentialing. Our world is small. It is also across the street and down the road and across the globe. So globalization really means people everywhere, not just people in other countries. It means the people in our own country as well. So my real dream for 2030 is that we would have a nurse heading up the World Health Organization, because the majority of healthcare is delivered by nurses. We have more than 27 million nurses in the world, and yet we are not in charge of the world's health. So we can dream big. Thank you, Mary Beth, for the question.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for your exquisite, thoughtful, invigorating answers.